Hi, welcome to LADYADA.
Hey everybody! Wow, it has been an exciting week. Can you believe all the stuff that's happened? I barely can.
No.
Okay, no. Phil says no.
I do not want to believe what's happening.
Okay, I know, but we are still stuck with it. We are in this reality, sadly. But okay, let's top it off. Okay, in addition to having our government change over, we had in America we had an inauguration. There was also the release of a new chip, the Raspberry Pi Pico, based on the RP2040. A new microcontroller has entered the arena. Very exciting because microcontrollers have really been dominated by big players like NXP and ST and Atmel/Microchip, and then people sometimes use Nuvoton or Renesas. But for the most part, there's like kind of basically 5 or 6 big ones. Espressif came in a couple years ago with the ESP series, and now there is the RP2040. So we did a big live stream on Wednesday night, very early, and you can go check that out. It's on YouTube, where we talk for about 30 minutes about the chip. But now it's been out for a couple days, so people are maybe more used to it. So if you have questions about the chip, I only had it for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks more than most people. Like I didn't know about this months and months ago. This is fairly new still to me. But we did get to put together a couple of boards, so I can show those off on the overhead if people want to see some of these designs.
Let's start off with that.
Okay.
So we have...
this is the Pico.
The Pico, and then we have a couple boards, and we have more boards in the works as well.
Okay, so this is the first board I designed, not surprisingly. It's a feather. So it's, almost about the same size as the Pico. It's like a little bit shorter, it looks like, and it's a little bit wider, so it's not like pin compatible. And like I'll just compare them side by side for ease of comparison. So the Pico has a micro USB port, and our feather has a USB Type-C because folks seem to like that. We have a LiPo charger on the feather because people like the LiPo charger, and a linear regulator. Whereas this chip is a buck boost, which means we covered buck boosts a couple weeks ago. You can use, I think, like 2 to 5 volts, anywhere in between. So it's a very forgiving power supply. The Pico does not have a reset button. It only has a bootloader button, but we have a reset button here and the bootloader button down there. I really like reset buttons. They're quite handy. We have a debug SWD port. So this chip is a Cortex M0, so it uses SWD. So we have like the standard 2x5 header connector here, whereas on the Pico you solder wires on the end. We have the same chip. It's got the cute Raspberry Pi logo on it. We have an SOIC flash chip. This one is a USON flash, I think, up here. Pretty much the same idea, though. It's like you've got a flash chip, and we're not exactly sure which size we're going to ship on the feather. I think 4 megabytes because it's shared with CircuitPython or MicroPython, as well as the internal memory, because this has no internal flash. And then this is that bootloader button. There's a crystal here. And this is a STEMMA QT connector. People love those for plug and play, all sorts of sensors. We also have a itsy bitsy, just making it really small. You can see we kind of took the design and squished it quite a bit. So it's got pins all the way around, so lots of GPIO, like 23 GPIO, a reset button, a bootloader button, flash memory here, again, probably 4 megabytes, NeoPixel, all the power supply stuff needed, and the Pico chip over here. And this one I have to add silk screen and stuff. The feather is getting close to release. And, we also have CircuitPython released for it. That was another thing that happened this week. We have been working on CircuitPython, mostly Scott, and I did a couple small board definitions and bug reports over the last couple weeks. And it works really well. And if you really like the CircuitPython experience of plugging into your computer, shows up as a disk drive, you can edit files. We have a lot of the peripherals working. Like we have I2C and SPI and Display IO, JSON, regular expressions, file system stuff. We're still working on UART and audio. So that isn't supported quite yet. Those are usually the last things that we get added into a new build definition. But we do have some PIO support. So we actually have an assembler that Scott wrote. So when you write your PIO code, it's actually in like the C format. It's basically kind of copy and paste it in. And then we actually parse and assemble the instructions on the fly and push them into the PIO peripheral. Yeah, questions?
Is there a specific USB-C they usually use? Darren's designing a board. It was planning to use the USB micro, but is now debating switching to USB-C.
I like these USB-Cs. So first off, they're glossy and they kind of look like a little candy. We stock actually these in the shop. We also did, I think, a great search on USB-C.
Yeah.
But I like these simplified ones because USB-C, there can be there are connectors that have like the Thunderbolt connectors and like all of the different pins. But this is a simplified USB 2.0 only. It only brings out the pins that you really need. They're not too expensive. They're like 25, 50 cents a piece. So very comparable with the micro USB and not much bigger. I think they probably picked micro USB though because this can also be a USB host, and the micro B is a USB host friendly connector because you can have it be it can be one direction or the other direction, whereas USB-C is really peripheral only.
What's the CPU speed of the Pico?
The chip has a crystal of 12 megahertz, and it phase lock loops that up. It sounds like for most C and MicroPython and CircuitPython, I think we're running it around 125 megahertz. You can run it at 133 comfortably. That's the specification. But a lot of the really funky, crazy demos of like it's running a monitor or two, or it's like an emulator, those are running it, I think, at 200 megahertz. So you can overclock it, apparently. And, when you overclock it, you're breaking the warranty in technicality, but it seems to work.
All right, I'll answer this one. Anyone else impressed on how under the radar the RP2040 and Pico came? Those were in the know, but the NDA embargo was so respected, there was not a peep until it was announced. Yeah, so we were invited, I think maybe about a month before it released, to repo because we do technical work. And I'll say this, I was going to write a note to Eben about it, but just ran out of time during the week. I think this is a really good example of what everyone says is possible, but they never go for it. So SparkFun was there, Arduino was there, Pimeroni was there, and somehow, some way, all of us, without lawyers and tons of middle management.
There wasn't like NDA signing for everybody. I mean, it was like...
So it was a secret thing. We all agreed just to like not share anything, and somehow we did it. And working with other companies, there's big chip companies that wanted to talk to us or work with makers, and it's like you just can't.
They sign a 5-year NDA and like it's crazy.
Not only that, they want to have 5 or 6 Zoom phone calls because they have 14,000 people in their organization and they don't have enough stuff to do.
Yeah.
So everyone's like, well, we should meet constantly, always, forever. And before COVID, they're like, no, we absolutely have to come out and spend a week at Adafruit. No, you have to come out to Texas or whatever. Absolutely have to.
Yeah.
And so I think this was everyone's desire to get beyond that because it doesn't make sense. It never made sense. And now finally I think we can prove, and this is, if there was time, I would write an entire thing just on this because we saved so much time and money not having to deal with like Todd in marketing that's like bothering us on Zoom calls for hours and days at a time.
Yeah,
like,
it was basically just Eben.
There was no Todds.
Eben just emailed and said, hey, here's this chip. Do you want to like hang out and make hardware? And I said, yeah, sure. Specs sound good. And he's like, okay, you're invited to the GitHub repo. And like, that was it.
So like everyone was like, hey, this is great. Let's not mess this up. Because like we're just tortured by like these terrible giant chip companies. They're the worst. Anyways.
Okay. Any other questions people have or?
No, people agree.
Okay, cool. I'm glad they agree.
So it's like they agree. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see if there's anything else here. Keep going.
Okay. Well, I thought let's jump. Now that we've seen the RP2040, if you get a Pico, put it together and check out CircuitPython. We have a build release for it. It's in the downloads page. It's all merged in. It's wonderful. Uses TinyUSB and UF2. One thing that as our segue, we're doing a couple TikToks and we've been posting them, and that was exciting. We did that this week as well, and we got a question on our TikTok. Let's pull up the question.
Well, we're going to do the Great Search now, right?
Well, yeah.
All right, so let's kick off the Great Search and then do the question.
Okay, let's go to school.
Where in the world is that part I need? The Great Search with DigiKey.
All All right, the Great Search brought to you by Adafruit DigiKey. This is a question from our TikTok, and this is what's going to be this week's Great Search. What type of brand solder do you use for projects? Down to my last spool from Radio Shack. It's from Robbie.
Crying tears emoji. Okay, Robbie. A great question. Because, solder is not as easy as it used to be. And, a lot of people really liked solder that they could get from their local electronics shop. And I thought I would show that you can buy solder from DigiKey, which is... it's kind of obvious, of course they would sell solder, but a lot of people don't think about that. They end up buying it from elsewhere because they don't your hardware store or whatever, when in fact you can buy pretty much any kind of solder you like from DigiKey. So let's go check out what's available on the DigiKey site for solder. Okay, so let's open up DigiKey. And so one thing I wanted to show is the person asked, how do I get, I got my Radio Shack solder. So what a lot of people, when they say that, what they mean is, and I'll move this over here, they mean the silver bearing, they mean the silver bearing solder. This is kind of like a famous, not inexpensive, but really popular solder that was available for many, many years at your local shop. And one cool thing about solder is you can, solder is solder. Pretty much, as long as you get the same metal contributions correct, all the different metals that are inside of the solder, you're going to have the same experience, which is really good. So if you want to get a pound of this instead of 1.5 ounces, it's possible. But here's something to watch for. So I went to DigiKey and I just typed in, this says silver bearing solder, and I was like, okay, I'll search for silver solder. And what came up was actually, there's a couple categories, but if you go to solder, you'll notice that they do have solder, but the only ones that come up under this search are these lead-free solders that are, and then you have to look at the composition, 96% tin and 4% silver. So let me show also only the in stock, which is not what you want, right? This composition is not the composition you see in this photo, which is 62-36-2. And it says here, tin 62, lead 36, silver 2. And if you're wondering, well, how do you know what all these are? You look it up in your periodic table of the elements. That's how these are labeled. So they don't literally say lead. Well, there's still something say lead free, but they won't say tin 8% or whatever. You have to look up the symbol on your periodic table. So having done that, if you look at this, then you're probably thinking, well, they don't stock the kind of solder, but it's not true. They do. You just have to know how to search for it. So instead, what you want to search for is wire solder. And solder comes in bars and pastes and stuff, but we're looking for the wire solder style. And then click on solder. I'm sure all the British people are it's solder. Sorry, I'm American. It's solder here. Okay, and then let's go to active, just so we only get stuff we can get. And again, we want wire solder, so let's select that. And there's all these different brands, but here you can see the compositions. And again, it's in, it's chemical percentage style, so you'll have to read carefully because there's a lot of letters and numbers. And they're not sorted because it's not a number. So going back, this is tin 62%, lead 36. So let's see if we can get close. So this is lead 60, tin 40. That's not what we want. We want okay, this looks pretty close. There's tin 62, lead 36, silver 2. Okay, so this is what we want. And then let's just make sure there's nothing else. There's a couple other silver ones with this AG symbol, but they have more tin. We want the tin lead. Now, say this is, obviously it has lead in it. It is not lead-free solder. So if you are running a row house shop or you're trying to be a lead-free operation, you wouldn't use this in production. However, I do use leaded solder when I'm putting together prototypes. Why? It's just it is a lot easier to use, and it's a lot easier to rework. And if I'm doing prototypes, I may not have all the tools that we have in production where we do, stenciling and we have optical inspection. So I might use leaded solder at home because I'm in America and it's legal to use leaded solder. This is the land of the free and the leaded. Okay, so apply to only see those. All right, so now we have a lot of options, but let's look at only the ones in stock because I'm going to order this today. So first thing you note is there's a couple different packages and a couple different width of solder. So the diameter of the solder is also something you want to pay attention to. So you can see here there's 0.5 millimeter and 0.8 millimeters, or 0.02 inch or 0.03 inch. Which do you want? Well, if you're doing fine pitch soldering, usually you probably want to go with 0.02 or even 0.015. If you're doing a lot of thick through hole, like chunky stuff, 0.031. I happen to like 0.02 even for the thick stuff, but like it's, you can also try a little bit of each, but basically for SMT 0.02 through hole, I like 0.03. If you look at this is kind of right in the middle there, it's 0.022, but let's just say 0.02. You know what I mean. All right, so now we only have 9 options. So now the options are, there's a couple different suppliers. There's ChipQuick and there's Kester. And there's different packages. So you can get these little spools. Now personally, I can't stand these. I always feel like there's just way too little solder. But if you're only doing a couple repairs once in a while, it goes in your toolbox, you know what? These aren't too bad and they're inexpensive. This is $6, which is pretty cheap for silver solder. That said, you can also, if you're just going like whole hog, you can get, from Kester, a 1 pound spool, or from ChipQuick, they also have a 1 pound spool. And so this is a 1 pound spool. This lasts like a really long time. Like, even I using solder all the time, this will last me more than a year. So a pound is quite a bit. That said, if you really like this solder, you pick up a pound of it for $50 and you never have to think about it again. But, let's say we're not like that. We want, like this one is 1.5 ounces, 42 grams. I personally think that you should probably get about 50 grams plus of solder. Anything less, and I think you're just going to be frustrated because you're running out unexpectedly. So let's look at the 2 and 4 ounce, maybe also the 8 ounce. And let's ignore the 1 ounce spool, way too small, and the less than 1 ounce tubes, also ridiculous. Another thing just to watch for is there's a couple different fluxes available. There's no clean water soluble, and rosin activated. Now, technically, I believe that the this silver bearing solder, even though it's not mentioned here, I believe it is rosin activated, which is a solder that's technically you need to clean off. And I personally prefer no clean, and luckily when you're looking for these sizes, it's only available no clean. If you really want to research whether you want activated, activated's going to be a little bit easier to solder and rework with, but it is active, like you should clean it off after you're done. Whereas no clean, you don't have to clean. Okay, so given that these are all no clean, here's your options. So you can get 2, 4, and 8 ounce for about $12, $20, and $25. The more you get, the cheaper it's going to be. That's just how it goes. It's kind of like some incentive to get a little bit more. But this 2 ounce is still a pretty good amount. This will last you, a month or two at least, even if you're doing a lot of soldering. So I would pick this up. This one is my recommended. So SMD 3SW from ChipQuick, leaded solder. If you are in, I just want to go back, even though that's my pick, going back to wire solder. If you're in a, your RoHS, you are lead free, click the RoHS compliant checkbox. And then when you search, you're not going to get the leaded solder over here. You're going to get only the tin and silver. And for that, the one I tend to use when I have to go lead free is this one, which, let me see if I can read off what it says. This one is 96.5 tin and 3% silver and a little bit of copper. So it's like one of these. But, you can also look online. There's people who definitely have. There's going to be a lot more lead-free solder options because people are so picky and it's so difficult to work with these solders. Another thing, of course, you can do is just look at, what's the most popular by searching for stock and then reverse searching by amount in stock. So yeah, these Kesters and multi-cores, this one is pretty popular, this lead-free. So that might tell you, like, what you might want to pick up because it's, like, everyone else seems to like it, you might like it too. But definitely, if you're looking for lead-free, you're not going to be able to get that nice silver-bearing solder. You're going to have silver in your soldering wire, but it's not going to be the same solder you think you remember from when you were a kid, putting together through whole kits from Radio Shack.
All right, and that's a great search.
Thank you.
Where in the world is that part I need? The great search with DigiKey.
All right, so here's some questions that came
Okay.
in. We'll start with the soldering ones that came in. Any thoughts on soldering expire? Thought the resin would sublimate or something. No solder paste has shelf life issues.
I'm sorry, they said for solder paste?
For solder expiring.
Oh, wire solder doesn't really expire.
Just keep it not wet.
Yeah, I mean, like, it doesn't really go bad.
Okay.
I've never even heard of that. I mean, definitely paste does. You have to keep it cold. There's an expiration date on it. But that's because it starts to separate a little bit too much. And I had to toss out a little bit of solder paste left over like a week ago because it was a year after expiration and it finally, you can tell when it goes bad. You're like, this is really squishy and mushy.
All right, well, folks are answering this in the chat, but what's the benefits of lead solder?
Lead solder is easy to work with. It requires a lower temperature. It's shinier. It doesn't matte as much, it doesn't bunch together as much. But it has lead in it, and in some countries it's not used anymore. It's not available for purchase, and if you're selling stuff, you can't use it and call your product RoHS compliant.
Okay. Next up. 4 Picos on the way. I'm hoping to use them as USB MIDI devices, hopefully written entirely in Python. Can this be done?
Absolutely. Very easy. Just check out any of our USB MIDI project examples. It just works in CircuitPython perfectly. I actually tested it myself as one of the tests that I did when I first got the Pico.
Okay, how does the RP2040 compare with the teensier M4 Feathers? I was wondering if any specific project scenarios might be suited for Pico.
Pico is just pretty fast, and it's low cost. So you're going to get like Teensy 3 type speeds from it. Even though this is a Cortex M0, it has some, for stuff that's not pure floating point calculations, you're going to get pretty good performance just because it's running at 120 megahertz or 125. So I found it to be a really good experience for CircuitPython. Also, there's a lot of RAM. So there are a lot of situations where having like 256K of RAM lets you calculate and manipulate your data a lot faster than if you have to like save it to disk and read it back. Like with 256K, you can keep a large data set in memory to manually to work on.
Okay, and then someone want to know, I'll just paraphrase, how do they get access to the chips, the RP2040 smaller maker companies like Electronic Cats?
The chips will be about, look, I only got like 10 chips. I have 2 left, which is a little bit stressful for me.
The way that I think that they did this, so if you're an authorized reseller, which anyone can apply and be an authorized reseller, you just have to sell stuff. They went through those channels first because they're authorized resellers. And those are the folks who knew the boards were coming.
Yeah.
Within like 30 days or so, maybe it was a little bit longer than that. And then we got the heads up and got a small number of chips, like 10, about a month or so ago. And
I'm sure DigiKey's going to have it.
Yeah.
Because they're an authorized reseller. And as soon as they are, we'll do a great search on it.
Yeah, we've only heard that this is going to, their goal is to get these out and everything.
Yes,
so.
They're absolutely going to sell them in the reels. I can't see what the pricing is because it's none of my business. But it's going to be very competitive, and I'm sure you'll be able to buy them from DigiKey. We'll probably stock, one-offs. If you just want a couple, we'll have them, but they will be generally available. This is not how it is with the Broadcom chips used on the Raspberry Pi. You cannot purchase those Broadcom chips on like the Pi Zero. They're not available to you because like Broadcom is very protective of who they sell chips to, whereas with the Pico, the Pi Foundation has, from what I've heard, they are completely interested in having everybody get access to these chips. So you'll be able to get them.
Does Lamar use low temp rework solder?
I use this leaded solder for when I'm doing rework, but my paste is lead free.
Okay. Do you have to worry about lead fumes?
Lead doesn't fume.
Okay.
Like if you think about it, like there's no metal doesn't create a fume. What you're thinking about is the flux, and you just have a fan.
Okay. Will the increased memory contain more CircuitPython libraries than the M0 feathers?
Oh, tons more. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, like you can just go to town. You can import pretty much every library almost. It's just massive. 264K is a lot. I mean, you don't get me wrong. You can exhaust it, but it's not easy.
All right. And yeah, shout out to Electronic Cats.
Okay,
We like-
meow.
well, they're pretty much my favorite maker open source hardware company. So.
They're my favorite feline-based maker company.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's good stuff. But yeah, you'll be able to get these chips. Will I get them maybe a little bit before you? Yeah, probably, because
Maybe.
I've already been able to put in an order. But you'll get them like a week or two later.
Yeah.
There's no secret agreement where only I get them. That's not how it is at all. I just got 10 samples.
Yeah, usually we're excluded from stuff, so yeah, that's how it goes.
Okay, cool. Well,
right.
that's my show.
That's it for this week. We'll see everybody
All
during the
right.
week. We have our shows on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and Friday. Stay tuned for all that stuff. More surprises and new hardware coming out and more.
Okay, cheers everybody.
See
Have a
everybody
great
next
week.
week. That was just LADYADA.
Bye.